Okay, I am going to go ahead for just a moment and turn on my camera on my video so that I can say hi before I turn it off again. I'm Karen Kuipers. I'm the Community Development Manager for Salt Lake County Housing and Community Development. I do have my team on the line. I'm not sure whether they'll have their cameras on or not. Sometimes we get better bandwidth if we don't. But Amanda, do you want to go introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. My name is Amanda Cordova. Many of you already know me, but for those of you that don't, I am the Community Development and Service Program Coordinator for our team.
Great, thank you. And Vikram, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vikram, and I'm the Impact and Implementation Coordinator.
Okay, thank you. And then I also have Mary on the phone. You'll see Mary Leonard. She's going to raise her camera up to say hi. Mary is our new temporary, she's our office specialist. And so she is helping us, probably one of the only people that is currently in the office. So you'll see that in the background behind her. But she also is available on site for those of you who may need additional information or assistance on site. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is the application training for the fiscal year 2021 Community and Support Services grants. That is for the SSBG, ESG, and CDBG public services grants that are administered through the Salt Lake County Division of Housing and Community Development. Before we begin, again, if you'll just go ahead and mute your microphone unless you would like to speak. We are providing a few slides for reference. The meeting recording will be available. Normally it's in about 24 hours. It depends on how long our system takes to generate that. At that time, we will make the training available both in Zoom grants as well as out on our website. I do want to point out that this is intended to be more of a presentation, and the information in the slides themselves is very limited. So I would recommend that you take good notes, ask questions, or if you look at the slides later and have additional questions, to contact us. Your connection may be better if you turn your camera off. Sometimes that ties up your bandwidth. There's some information here. On the bottom of the screen, depending on your system, there should be a microphone or a camera icon. If they're highlighted in red, they're off, and if they're black, they're on. And then if you don't see that row of bubbles, if you just move your mouse around and hover at the bottom, you should see those icons appear. If you're calling in, you can dial *6 to mute yourself or unmute yourself. And you can also open the participant window if you'd like to see everybody else who is on the call. You can also raise your hand within that window up at the top. All right, the way that we're going to approach this today in this part 1 of training, we're hoping to tie this up in an hour. For those of you on the call who have participated in our trainings before, typically this training is about 3 hours. We are going to streamline this. We're going to try to get through everything that we need to for those of you who are used to the process in about an hour. And we'll do an overview of the funding opportunity, and we'll go through some detailed instructions for completing the application. Hopefully about 11 o'clock, we'll start having time for some question and answers for anything that comes up during the presentation that you'd like more information on. After the question and answer period, approximately about 11:15, that will be the opportunity for any of you who are joining us who are not familiar with either the CDBG, ESG, or SSBG funds. If this is the first time that you're applying, or if it's been a while and you need an update on some of the newer regulations, we invite you to stay on for the second half of the training. Those of you that this is old hat for, you've been doing this for a while, you should be able to drop off after this first section for the second half, and you should have all the information that you need. All right, so for the overview of the funding opportunity, Again, the way that we're going to approach this virtual training is we're just going to walk through the actual application. We're going to give instructions as we go through it. And if you're new to Zoom grants, again, we're not going to cover that in this first part of the training. In the second half, we'll go into some detailed instructions on how to create an application in Zoom grants. But for this first hour, we're assuming that those of you that are on the line are familiar with at least navigating in Zoom grants. For these slides here, this is when we're going through and actually covering the material out live on Zoom grants. You may want to use these slides for notes at the end, but we're going to cover the application tabs. We're going to cover the library resources. And with any luck, I'm going to click on this and we're going to go out. Thanks for bandwidth issues myself this morning. This is that awkward silence where if you can hear my dog in the background, she decided to come in and join the training and she's now snoring behind me. So I apologize for anybody who hears the dog snoring in the background. All right, once you get into the application, again, for those of you that are new to Zoom grants, we'll have additional information later on exactly how to get in and navigate the Zoom grants application. But for those of you that are already familiar with it, again, once you come into the initial dashboard, you're going to have your introductions, your funding opportunities, who may apply, everything that you're seeing, kind of the narratives that are available to you. You can go ahead and read through these, and we'll go through them in a minute. But once you're done and you don't want them to tie up your screen, I recommend you go ahead and click on hide this, and you'll be able to see more of your screen. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about this funding opportunity. The difference this year is that, boy, we sure have a lot of money that has come into the community over the last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, Salt Lake County is working very diligently to take a look at the resources that are available and to leverage the dollars that are one-time dollars that are coming through both through the stimulus and other sources, and make sure that we fully utilize those funds, and that as those expire or as those are utilized, that we then have our regular funding sources, again, the Community Development Block Grant, the Social Services Block Grant, and the Emergency Solution Grant, our regular allocations of those available for fulfilling the needs ongoing. One of the things that we are focusing on this year is recovery, and you'll hear this as we go throughout the application, is that we really want to take a look at how do we regain the losses that have happened over the last year. And so although our priorities are the same, we will continue to prioritize housing stability, and economic mobility. We are looking at those through the lens of recovery. So for those populations that many of you serve, we recognize that as the economy starts to recover, that many of the individuals that you work with are going to have barriers to being able to participate in that recovery. And so we want to focus our regular ESG, SSBG, and CDBG dollars on helping, again, for housing stability and economic mobility and housing, and how can we look at that through the recovery lens. We do know that there's some emerging needs. We have listed some that are identified, but we also recognize that there are others that you, in your expertise and what you're doing in the trenches, are aware of. But we have pointed out 4 areas that we're particularly interested in addressing those emerging needs, which are really threatening those recovery gains for those certain demographics in our community. These include, but are not limited to, childcare. There is a lot of data that we're seeing that individuals, parents that have lost their job or had to cut hours in order to juggle the childcare and homeschooling responsibilities are now struggling to re-enter the workforce. And so Salt Lake County is particularly interested in what are those programs that are addressing the barriers to childcare that are faced by these parents that are returning to the workforce. We are interested in those job training opportunities for living wage jobs to make sure that those individuals, particularly we know that there's a lot of people that are in the service industry that are making lower wages that are really struggling right now. They've lost their housing, they've lost their job for a period of time, and just to get them back to where they were a year ago, we know that there's some job training opportunities. We'd like to see how we can help not only have individuals recover and get back to where they were, but be poised to really take advantage of the expanding of the economy that we hope to see in the near future. Microlending is another activity, programs that offer case management and support in conjunction with microloans to low to moderate income households, and also digital access. Again, there's a lot of data, and all of you on the front lines understand that individuals who already don't have access to technology, and yet that is the only way that they can tap into services or resources, and how do we bridge the digital divide, particularly for those lower income households, either through training or subsidized access to technology services or devices. So one thing I do want to point out is that this is the soft cost, as we call it, training, which is more operations and supportive services. For those of you that will also be considering submitting an application for hard cost activities, there are 2 applications this year. One of them is clearly identified as the hard cost projects for housing and public facility improvements. And there is a second one that is specific for the urban county jurisdiction members. And so if you are also submitting an application under hard cost umbrella, please make sure that you're paying attention to the title and that you apply appropriately. We are doing the same thing that we did 2 years ago for our soft cost programs, which is those applicants who are awarded funds this year may be considered for a contract renewal for a second year of funding, pending a demonstration of satisfactory performance and the availability of federal funding. We want to give you time to run your programs and not need to come back in 9 months to start looking at funding the following year. So we will continue that going into 2022. With that, let's talk for a minute about, again, the funding priorities. And you will be able to see on your screen the activities that fall underneath the soft cost programs. And although the priority is housing stability, and economic mobility, the activities that may fall under that for this request for application is those around case management, childcare, again, digital access. You can see the listing under the funding priorities tab if you want to go through that. For those of you that are looking at homeless services and the potential for ESG funds, just be aware that homeless prevention, rapid rehousing services, and shelter operational cost, that is limited to the regular allocation of ESG funds, which is about $200,000. All right, and this again is for nonprofits or quasi-governments. For housing authorities, would be the appropriate organizations to apply underneath this request for applications. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump right in. For those of you, again, that are familiar with Zoom grants, we're not going to go into the cover sheet, but on tab 2, you will find that there's instructions up at the top of the tab, but really all you need to do is answer the questions on tab 2, and this should give you an idea of whether or not this funding is appropriate for your program. Just go through and check the boxes. Read them, make sure that they make sense to you. If you have any questions, give us a call. You don't apply for a specific funding source underneath this request for application. What you're doing is applying for the merits of your program. And you just want to check the boxes to tell us whether or not your program would be eligible based on who you're serving, what the matching requirements are, and your nonprofit status. We are looking at risk factors. We're looking at your fiscal processes and internal controls. But again, if you'll just go through and answer the questions, this will give us what we need to take a look at capacity of your organization. You do have the opportunity at the bottom on question number 15, if there's something that you were just dying to tell us and wanted to give us more information, but there wasn't a place, you can go ahead and fill that in at the bottom of 15. You also have the opportunity to attach key staff resumes and bios if you'd like, which you may not have a chance within the narratives to really expand on that. On tab 3, in the applications questions, I'm going to just walk through these with you. And this is where we're going to take the bulk of our time today to make sure that you understand what's here and the considerations as you go through. Again, you do have the opportunity to attach a video if you'd like. You know, sometimes it's easier to just walk through and talk to your clients or explain it to us rather than put it in writing. This is a really good way, as long as you can figure out a way to keep it brief, to just demonstrate to the reviewers maybe the things that we just don't pick up on in the application. In the application overview on this executive summary, what I want to point out here is this is very brief. This is 1,000 characters or less. I'm sorry, 1,000 characters or less. This is what we attach to the proposals when we provide them to the mayors. And so it needs to be very brief, but it needs to cover the basics. This should really include the amount that you're asking for, the activities that are going to be funded, and the accomplishments which are anticipated. So you may say, you know, Amazing Nonprofit X is applying for our rapid rehab program to serve homeless individuals and families. We are seeking whatever, $100,000, and we are going to provide housing opportunities for those that are literally homeless to ensure that they're stably housed and that they move out of homelessness into stable housing. Whatever that is, just basically cover those things so that when you have an overview that's provided to the mayor, they really understand what are you asking for, what program it is, what do you want us to pay for, and what are you going to achieve with it. For the agency overview, this is talking about your agency and the history and the mission. This is who you are, why you do the work that you do, and how you go about it. We have limited, so in the past couple of years, these narrative boxes have just given you as much space as you have wanted. We have cut that back this year because our timeline has been shortened. Our committee is going to have about 4 less weeks to review your application. And so many of the questions that we've asked before, we've either cut out or we have streamlined in the hopes that not only can you submit this application faster, but that our review committees will be able to get through them and evaluate them quicker. So again, for the agency overview, you have 3,500 characters, which is a little bit more than a page. You might want to, if you're cutting and pasting from a Word document, make sure you're doing it as plain text so you're not getting a lot of characters and things that are tying up your character count. Project priority on number 3, this is your opportunity to describe your project. You've got about 2 pages of text here that you can work with. This is really where you're talking about the particular program or project that you're requesting funding for, and briefly, how does it fit into your overall agency services, especially if it's something that appears to be completely out and left field from what you normally do. Just explain to us why it is that the program or the project that you're asking for funding for still fits in your agency mission. Really important here is to talk about how your program's prioritized by your agency. So based on that, what's the contingency plan? If you're not awarded the requested funds, or if you're awarded a reduced amount, please address that in this narrative box. Really, this is demonstrating to us, where does this project get ranked in the prioritization of your funding? and what are you going to do if you don't get the funds? How is it that you're going to address that, or what is your contingency plan? On number 4, just let us know if this is new, continued, or expanded. This is really tying into the CDBG requirements. We just need to understand if you're requesting funding, it either needs to be a new program or we're expanding on services if you're going to be funded with CDBG funds. So if you'll just answer that. On the impact of requested funding, again, just read the question and answer. We just want to know, is this to keep your program level where it's at? Is it to increase services? Or is it to, for some reason you have imminent cuts and it's to prevent those cuts? So the coordination and collaboration, these have been combined in the past year. This has been 2 separate sections. What we're looking for here is for the depth of your relationships and your partnerships. We're not looking for a list of 300 different agencies that you work with. We want to understand the roles. How is it that your agency is sharing data or sharing outcomes, working for the same outcomes, or how is it that you're working together? So please don't just put a list here. Talk to the role of your agency as you serve your clients. Number 8 on the funding priorities, this is where you're going to need to decide which of these priorities your project fits under. And this is a branching question, so depending on how you select this, it is going to determine the performance indicators that you have to choose from. In a little bit, we're going to go through Appendix C and we'll tell you where you can take a look at those, but you'll choose one in the alignment. On question number 9, this is talking about your recovery focus. This is a brief overview of what is above. Talk about how that now drills down into the recovery needs of your clientele. This should be fairly short. It's just talking about, okay, we are providing housing stability because our population has these particular needs in order to regain what they've lost in the last year. So there are going to be some additional complexities related to recovery for your population. That's where we want to tie this in. Those losses that were sustained during the pandemic, how is that specific to your populations that are served underneath these 4 priority umbrellas? With the program capacity, just go ahead and either check the boxes or fill in the numbers. I do want to point out that this first one is how many that you will not be able to serve. And then, actually, I've just noticed a type. I'm going to fix this after. This first question here is how many will be served, and the second one is how many will not be served. And I apologize. It looks like that got doubled up there. With the program capacity, for those that are not able to be served, what are the reasons? And you can check as many as apply. For those that come to your agency, is it because funding criteria? Is it program criteria? You don't have enough resources? Just give us some insight as to why you're not able to serve any individuals that are being turned away. On the location of services, we just need physical addresses. On the alignment with the focus on recovery, this looks like the same question as 9. But it's not. We're asking you to get into more detail here. If you have any data or research that supports what you told us in question number 9, why is it that these program activities are going to help your clients overcome barriers to recovery? So in question number 9, it was more of what are you doing? And this is how. How are you carrying it out? And why is it effective? Number 14, in addressing the priority needs, this is just, again, tie it to housing stability and economic mobility. I want to point out that one of the differences in this application is in the past, we've asked you to talk to us about the need. Give us the research. Tell us what the need is on your population. And with that information, the allocation committee has considered which is the greatest need. That is different this year. We aren't asking you to tell us about the needs of your specific population, other than how are those needs aligned with the priorities that have been set. And hopefully that takes out about 6 of the questions. But that is what we are looking to fund, although we understand that you have many needs that are met by your programs, but we really want you to focus in on the priority needs that Salt Lake County has determined for this funding cycle. Question 15 is a little bit different for those of you that are doing, that have done this application before. Don't get too tied up into the HUD goal. We just need you to find the most appropriate and select one so that you're aware. The performance indicators that you choose and those metrics that are specific to your organization, your agency, we have always on the back end tied that into how they align with our strategic plan. We have a 5-year plan. We have a new plan that started in 2020 that will go through 2024. We have very specific HUD goals that we have tied to the requirements that HUD has. And these are the goals that are in our strategic plan, in our 5-year plan. So what I would like you to do is go through these and take a look at your program and just select which of these goals that is in our 5-year strategic plan is most aligned with your program. And you're going to answer the question according to the indicator that is here. So for example, if you were doing rental assistance and it's the number of households assisted with TDRA or rapid rehousing, this is for your full program. And we want you to put the number here. If it's 100 households, put 100 or 30. This number is important because it's going to be part of the calculations later on in the application. So just, again, figure out which one most closely aligns with your program. This is how HUD looks at it on the back end when we enter it into our information that goes in through the HUD system. On number 16, again, you're going to decide which activity categories. You can check as many as you want here, but this is what you're asking us to pay for the expenses for. We do have additional information and descriptions in the appendices if you have any questions on these. Depending on how you answered the question regarding your priority, that you'll either see 17, 18, 19, or 20. And so again, this is something that you're going to look at Appendix C to figure out what the performance metrics are that your program is tracking. And you're going to give us a number here. So if you can choose up to 4 goals, let's say that increased English proficiency, the number of individuals that remove an identified barrier to employment, making measurable progress in English. If your goal is 100 people here, that's what you're going to put in. Don't put an X or just mark this. We need to have numbers because this is going to translate to your performance metrics in your contract. And then on 21, this is brief. This doesn't need to be long. Just let us know what are your other program metrics besides what we're asking for. You may have some really good data that you're collecting that you're using to evaluate the effectiveness of your activities. If you share that with us here, we would appreciate that. All right, question 22. You can check as many as you would like on this. Just let us know which populations that you serve. On question number 23, you're only selecting one. This is a category. Again, I recognize that you may serve multiple individuals in different categories, but we want you to choose the one that most closely aligns with your mission. The reason is we use this when we categorize and put the applications together. So if your primary purpose is homeless services, we don't want to lump your application together with children and at-risk youth, for example. Question 24 is important. For those of you that were funded in the last 2 years, you know that this was added into your contract. On underserved populations and outreach, we want to know your processes. So how are you evaluating the participation rates of certain demographics? What are you doing within your agency to take a look at that? And do you have any affirmative marketing or outreach strategies to make sure that if you are recognizing that you're not serving the same ratio in the population that, for example, if you're serving all single white females, that is not going to be the same ratio as we would expect to see in the community. So just tell us about how you're evaluating yourself and what you're doing to outreach to any of the underserved communities. All right, on number 10 on the, on number 25 on the budget. This is new. We're trying to, again, reduce the amount of time that you need to speak to the budget and the amount of time that the committee members are looking at and interpreting the budget. So what we would like you to do is just follow these instructions and do these quick ratios. Your cost per service is going to be based on your total budget divided by however many you put in the HUD goal up in number 15. You should be able to just run that calculation and put that cost per service. On the second part of this, on the ratio of low and moderate income served, again, you're just going to take your population served table on tab 5, and it's going to tell you that you're getting 80% LMI in your program or 40% or whatever it is, just that ratio here. On question 26 on the leverage, again, you're going to need to look at tab 4, but for the ratio of funds that are leveraged with Salt Lake County grant funds, you just need to divide the total sources of funds by how much you've requested. So if you've requested $40,000 and it's a $100,000 project, you're going to end up with your ratio that you're going to put into that box. Also, the same thing on your committed funds, just divide the total sources of funds by the total amount of committed. This is telling us, are you, do you have 5 times the amount uncommitted as committed? You'll see very quickly when you run those ratios what the conversations are with the committee. They just want to know if you're coming into this, but you have 0 committed, versus an organization that has 80% of their funds, but they're looking to close the gap. That is a consideration of the committee, and you need to be aware of that. And hopefully when you start plugging in these ratios, you'll have an idea of the types of things that the committees look at as they're evaluating proposals. On question number 27, just talk to us about long-term sustainability. Again, we've provided 3,000 characters in this box. You don't need to use the full page, but just talk to us about what has your organization done with this program that you're requesting funds for to make sure that both financial and non-financial that are going to impact your long-term sustainability. The committee just wants to understand that you're having the conversations and any insight that they can get from you regarding what those conversations have been. Number 28, if applicable, just identify if you've got maintenance reserves and repairs in your budget line items. I'm going to share with you, part of this is that for our hard cost applications, we seem to be getting more and more applications from particularly nonprofit organizations that don't have in their budget a maintenance and repair line item. There's nothing in there to prepare or plan for the future. And we want to understand if it's just something that we're not seeing, or if this truly is across the board where there's a large number of nonprofits who are not able to set aside for maintenance and repair costs down the road. Question number 29, we just need to know if you're awarded SSBG or ESG, what's the anticipated source of funding? Question 30, you're just going to mark if you're planning on using the de minimis rate or if you have another indirect costs rate. And then question 31 is just go through and before you hit submit, just make sure that you have the different tabs. This is just more of a self checklist. It doesn't do anything other than have you think before you hit submit. Okay, so that is the meat and potatoes of the application right there. It does build off other tabs and builds off other resources that are listed within the application. On tab 4, for those of you that have done this before, we just need your budget. Tell us what's committed and what's non-committed, and plug them into each of the line items. When you do a refresh, you should see your total budget. It won't show up until you actually do that and hit refresh. But when you're finished, if you have a $200,000 budget, then we should be able to see $200,000 of expenses in this next table. If you have $300,000 of expenses but you've only accounted for $200,000 in revenue, I will tell you that the committees are going to be concerned. We need to understand at least what your plan is, even if you haven't got the committed resources yet. You have the chance at the bottom of the budget tab to provide a little bit of narrative, and we just want more information about your committed and non-committed resources, as well as any other revenues that may be pending but not confirmed yet. So, for example, if you have another grant application, it's been submitted. Maybe they've said yes. You've been preliminary awarded, but you don't have the letter yet. Just tell us what's going on there. And then also, your program expenses are differentiated from your agency expenses. Each of you do things differently, and you may have defined a program that is specific to case management, for example, or specific to a particular housing program. We just want to understand how this budget relates to your overall agency budget.
Hey.
On tab number 5 on the tables, we have at the top the population served. And again, for those of you that have filled this out in the past, that you should be very familiar with this. We are asking for your FY19 numbers, and that was the period of time that ended in June of 2020. So these are actual numbers. And you will notice we have a new entitlement city that came on in 2020, and that's Brighton. You may not have that information, obviously broken out for 19, that's fine. If you have an idea and can break it out for FY21, that would be great. But know that when we collect information for those of you that are awarded funds, we do have that additional jurisdiction that's listed. Be aware that over on the side, we also have the, just a reminder that we ask for how many clients with disabilities were served, and then just put estimated or actual in this column to tell us whether or not those numbers are actual or whether you're taking a guess. This one is important, and again, for those of you that have filled out this application before, you probably already have one that you can just plug in. Just go through and check the boxes. We use this to determine which course is appropriate if your program is recommended for funding. So just go through the boxes, read the description, and if your program meets this criteria, for example, SSBG save requirement, then just go ahead and check the box for SSBG. If it doesn't, then don't check the boxes. That is all that you should see, hopefully, at this point. Anything below that you don't need to worry about. The agency contact and annual report information will only be if you're awarded funds. So. On tab number 6, this is where, again, you're going to go through and attach documents. I just want to point out, we've gone ahead and put the placeholders in for contract prep as well. Please don't get overwhelmed when you look at this. You don't need to do anything that says contract prep or below. Only ones that we are expecting to see with this application are those document requests that have application at the front, which means that we're looking for a current agency board member roster. We're looking for a detailed program budget worksheet, and we're looking for the agency or program brochure if you'd like. This is optional. Everything below, just ignore. We don't need that right now. We did, again, for those of you that have filled out this application in the past, this application is 15 questions shorter than the last one. It is our hope that you can go through and fill this out much faster, and that it's not going to be a huge burden to get the information. And we are hoping that as you go through, if there's anything that you're seeing that you have question on that we haven't covered in detail in this training, because this is a different format, please just give us a call, either Vikram, Amanda, or myself, to answer anything as you go through it. But we are hopeful that this is going to streamline the process and it's not going to take you as long. So with that, this is the questions that are involved. The next thing is taking a look at those library documents. What have you got available to you? Everything that shows as an appendix, these are the documents you really need to look at. I would suggest that you at least open them up and take a look at them, because these are going to be the most important to you, as well as the federal grant handbook that we'll look at in just a moment. Everything that says reference, don't worry about opening up every one of these and taking a look, but just know as if you're looking for something specific, maybe you're wondering what on earth is allowable under CDBG for broadband or telecommunication. There's some attachments here that will help you. There's some information on the housing and social determinants of health that we'll take a look at here. But at any rate, go through these, take a look at the titles, particularly those of you who have done this for years. You're going to recognize most of these are the same documents and attachments. We will want you to take a look at the changes that have been made in the appendixes, and we'll go through those in just a moment. I am going to attempt, I'm trying to not have as many. All right. I think what we're going to do, in the interest of my computer not freezing up, is taking a look at some of these documents that you're going to find in the appendixes. Amanda, do you want to go ahead and briefly cover what is in Appendix A?
Yes. Are you guys able to hear me, Karen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So with Appendix A, this is the compliance and funding source reference. You will want to make sure that you read this thoroughly, because it is going to give you a lot of information, such as the eligible activities for each of the funding types, as well as some more information. So at the beginning, we go over the county acknowledgement provision. And then here you will see the eligible activities for CDBG. We have split those up so you can see the requirements for each of these funding sources. With CDBG, the following activities need to be identified, as well as meet the national objective. You will want to reference the CDBG guide, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If you have specific questions, there's a lot of information there. Just be aware it's like a 200-page document. However, we don't expect you to, dive deeply into it, but we do want you to be aware of where you can locate it and what information it does contain. With the Emergency Solutions Program, the eligible activities, be aware that these activities are, for example, we have the rapid rehousing and homeless prevention activities, as well as the, the street and shelter outreach activities. You'll want to identify which of these your agency is providing, and then also be aware that with with ESG funding, there are restrictions, and at least 40% of the county's total ESG grant allowance must be allocated to activities and programs for rapid rehousing and/or homeless prevention. Again, no more than 60% of the county's total ESG grant allowance can be used for category of shelter/street outreach activities. With the SSBG program, we have the eligible activities, and they need to at least address one of the following 3 goals. Be aware that SSBG funds are not eligible to be used for a few activities, and here you'll see those activities identified. For CDBG, be aware that there are eligibility criteria for geographic areas, and you'll find that information there. Again, Karen had just stated that Brighton is now a jurisdiction. And so just be aware that we will be in the future asking you to identify those numbers. With the employee status verification system, just be aware that you will need to make sure that you're in compliance, as well as within compliance of federal responsibilities, and that you'll find that information here. Homeless delivery and system and collective impact. Just be aware that any agency that is receiving the county funds for ESG, CDBG, or SSBG will be required to identify, and has been identified as a homeless service provider in your contract, are encouraged to apply to actively participate with the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. And you'll find some more information about that. Language assistance plan. Everybody needs to make sure that they're complying and in accordance to HUD's notice in the, let's see, so if you look at the final guidance to federal financial assistance, here you'll see the guidance does not increase Title VI requirements, but merely clarifies existing requirements. So please be aware that you need to provide language. Let's see, I apologize. Agencies that do not currently have a language assistance plan, you will need to make sure that you identify and you can reference that link. For ESG, there are matching funds that are required. And here you'll find that dollar for dollar match. SSBG, there is a 25% match, and there is no match for CDBG. You'll need to be aware of the non-discrimination policy, as well as make sure that you are registered and participating with the SAVE program. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it back on to Karen.
Okay, thanks. So in the interest of time, again, for those of you that are on the call, we want to just cover the things that are new. So for reference, Appendix B, if you want to go back and look at anything on service categories, definitions and terms, we would recommend that. I'm going to jump for a minute. We're going to come back to C. We have made available, particularly for those of you that are used to getting CDBG funds, we've added the matrix code definitions here. Don't get bogged down in this. Just know for those of you that, particularly this is more for the hard cost projects, it may be helpful to understand what are the different categories of services under CDBG. We also have the scoring criteria and evaluation tool. I do want to touch on this because this is important to you as you go through. So as you look at the application, they are ordered in the same way that this scoring tool is laid out. You have 10 points that are going to go towards the application overview. Partnerships is worth 5, agency capacity 10. There's some priority weighting given to how you're identifying your project alignment with housing stability, economic mobility, and recovery. There's 20 points to impact, goals and outcomes, project beneficiaries, budgets. So what I want to point out here is that you can look exactly at what the committee is going to be factoring in. 20 of the points are coming from housing and community development staff. These are more objective. This is really based on your agency capacity, your past performance does factor into this. Partnerships, just so that we can identify whether or not you have the partnerships in place to be able to effectively carry out the project. If you look through, you can see the specific factors that you have the opportunity to address in order to get the full scores on the 100 points that are available under this application. It also gives you an idea of what we're looking at. if you go down to the evaluation criteria, this is what they're trying to determine. So for everything that's included in the application overview section, which is your summary, your mission and services, your priority, your contingency plan, this is worth 10 points. Do you have the capacity to carry out the project as proposed? For your priority, this is a very calculated objective score that's coming in depending on your tie to recovery, whether or not you're doing one or more of the priority areas in housing, economic mobility, or increasing or sustaining. Your programming is up to 20 points. Again, you can see exactly what questions tie into the potential score and what category it falls under. And I would highly recommend that you just scan through this, see what the evaluation criteria are, and if you have any questions, reach out to us. I'm going to turn this over to Vikram in just a minute, but I'm going to touch on Appendix F, which is the System Navigator, really quick. The System Navigator program was fully implemented in May. For those of you that were funded in the past 2 years, we appreciate everything that you have been doing to help us understand the needs of your clients and to really help inform the development of this program. This is, as of, I want to say about 2 weeks ago, all of the modules are active in the MySAMI app. And MySAMI, which for those of you that don't know, stands for Secure Accessible Mobile Information. This is a client-centered, a client-facing portal so that individuals that you serve have the ability to carry all their documents, take all the demographic information that they're submitting on umpteen different applications, set goals, track their housing history, do everything that is typically documented case manager file. The individual client now have the ability to take that information with them. When they're working with your agencies, they should be able to request that information back and basically add it to their personal file. And when they go to a new agency or they go to a new organization that they're working with, they have the ability to share information that they choose with that organization. So they can basically start where they left off and rather than having to start back at the beginning. So we have been thrilled to have the input of the agencies thus far, and the client beneficiaries or the account owners who are also helping shape this technology. I do want to point out that this is really not only, it's a three-prong. The first, of course, is for the clients and empowering the clients to have their own information, share their information, and start trying to break down some of the bureaucracies that can be so frustrating and really hinder people from being able to reach their potential. It's also geared for the case managers and for your organizations and for your frontline staff to give them a tool to take all of those daily functions that you're already doing and try to empower the client to be able to help them in that process. So just so that you know, this will continue to be a requirement going into FY21. And what that means, when you say, what does that mean? It's a requirement. We will continue to ask that agencies post materials about the System Navigator pilot as we're starting to get that marketing material out into the community. We are asking that agency staff assist your clients who want to participate in SAMI by helping them register, just giving them the rundown of how they can sign up or how it would benefit them. If your frontline staff doesn't have time to get into details, I have system navigators who are available to help them as well. It also requires that if a client is sitting with you and says, hey, we just worked on this case plan and I'd like to take a copy of it, can I take a picture with my phone and add it to my file, that your staff is aware of, that they can do that as long as it's not something that's third-party information, but if it's their own information, empowering them to start taking that with them and working on it when they're not with your case managers. It also does require that if if the client's with you and says, I want to send you I'm going to send you a copy of my case file in SAMI, it's going to include my demographics. It has, you know, the assessment that we've been talking about, or it has these documents, that you will accept that. And if there are issues, that you bring them to our attention. If for some reason the technology isn't meeting the requirements of your agencies, that you work with us, because the intention is for clients to be able to have that, basically their briefcase in the sky, that when they come to you, they can say, I've already done all this over at agency A, B, or C, and I want to share with you what I've already done. And then also that, and when I say that accept the data, that doesn't mean that it's supposed to integrate with your system. We're not asking that. It's just if they want to email you a copy of anything that they're working with, or print out a copy, that you accept that from them. Also, the last requirement is that you engage with us. That is where the biggest benefit has been to us as we have developed SAMI, is having the case managers and the frontline staff and those that are really in the trenches and understand, that have come back and said, this is not working, or this is awesome, can we build on this, or hey, we're seeing this or seeing that. We need that input. We need to get the voices that are on the front line very actively a part of the technologies and processes that are rolling out, because you've just got a wealth of experience, and we want to make sure that those voices in your agency are being heard. Final reminder, clients are not required to participate in SAMI. There's nothing that says they have to. We want you to understand how they can benefit. If they're receiving housing stability case management, which is funded specifically to help with, as we've defined housing stability case management, we do have an assessment that is facilitated through SAMI. And if they're receiving that and they're using that, we want your case managers to know how to have them send that to them, or at least identify that they are using the app. And if you have any questions on this, we can go into this offline. So, Vikram, are you able to speak to Appendix C? And I realize this is a little bit awkward. I'm scrolling as you're talking, and I'm trying to keep up with you. So if you watch your screen and tell me where to scroll to. So.
Yeah. So as far as the outcomes for this year, we have them bucketed into these 4 categories. And so these should look familiar from those who've had grants in the past, but we have the increase or afford or sustain affordable housing inventory, economic mobility, and then crisis services. And then the large bulk of the different indicators are under housing stability right here. And so just as Karen was saying earlier, we just want to make this easier for you in recognizing we know that there are certain things that can be done to address community need. And so rather than spending a lot of time, we just want you to select up to 4 that best meet the needs of and best align with your program indicators and goals. So I think that's really it.
Great, thanks, Vikram. Okay, so last document before we open up for Q&A, the Federal Grant Application Handbook is also attached in your library documents. This takes everything that we've talked about and it just summarizes it. So if you want to figure out where things are, this is a good place to go. If you want to know who may apply, any information on application considerations, this will just help you zero in, and it will cover what we've already talked about. Do need to recognize that application deadline, this is short. I get that. I get that we have come out with requests for applications a lot later. Normally it comes out in October, and we have them due in November. There have just been a lot of balls in the air that with other sources and other programs coming down, and we needed to make sure that the priorities would be in place, and that when the right time comes for these funds, that we were set to do that. So you got a couple weeks. Monday, February 1st, that's the deadline, 9 a.m. The application has been shortened as far as the number of questions. It has been changed. The format has been changed so that you should be able to just check a bubble or figure out a calculation rather than put a lot of time into narratives. And it needs to be submitted prior to that 9 a.m. that morning. My team is always available. If you email us, we're going to respond. So if you have any questions that come up, so that is one thing that we want to make you aware of. Also, that as you look through this federal grants handbook, you'll also find the estimated amounts. Currently, the amounts that are available for the community and support services is a little bit under $1 million, and which is similar to prior years. The additional links are also in here. If you want to scroll down, you'll be able to find links to different resources. And as you're looking at, as nonprofit agencies, if you are considering submitting for a hard costs project, again, remember there's 2 other RFAs out there. You're going to want to look at the one that's for nonprofit and quasi governments. We currently have just over 900,000 estimated to be available for community and support services projects. And I think that's all that we really need to cover here. I'd rather really hear questions before we go into the in-depth for those of you that may be on the call that have questions about that are not familiar with the process at all. So, Amanda, can you monitor if anybody has their hand up or would like to speak?
Yes, I will.
And this is really quiet.
And I am not seeing any questions in the chat.
I just saw one from Jen. Do you want to read that?
Perfect. Yes, if a program falls into both ESG and SSBG/CDBG public service, should we submit 1 or 2 grants?
So you're only going to submit 1 application because you aren't applying for a funding source. What you're applying for is your program and the merits of your program. So you will submit 1 application. You will identify on tab 5 all of the different compliance requirements that you meet. And if you are recommended for funding, then staff will determine what the most appropriate source is. So the answer is you're going to submit 1 application for the program. If you have multiple programs, then you will want to submit multiple applications for the programs. And you'll want to name them and address the specific performance metrics and priorities for each of those programs.
Great, thank you.
Jen, did that answer your question?
Looks like it did answer her question. She said thanks.
Okay, and I saw something from Terry.
Yep, we do have another comment. Let me go ahead and read that. I apologize, I came in late. Did you go over how to start a new application through our login portals?
We did not yet, but after this Q&A, we'll dive a little bit more into detail about Zoom grants and how to do that. So if you aren't familiar with Zoom grants, we'll get into that in a few minutes. There's a couple different options. You can either link directly to the funding opportunity. We do have those links out there. Or if you go to the Salt Lake County main page, that is going to take you to all opportunities, and you should actually see 3 of those listed today.
Perfect. All right, we do have another comment. Question, knowing that February 1st at 9 a.m. is Monday, do we need to have all questions answered by your team prior to COB the previous Friday, or will you be available over the weekend should something last minute come up?
Although we highly recommend that you have it by Friday, and we also highly recommend that you don't wait until Monday morning to try to hit submit. Yes, my team is available. If you will email through the through either Vikram, myself, or Amanda, we do monitor our emails, and we'll monitor through the weekend.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. Given COVID, is it possible this year to get assistance with matching addresses to jurisdictions? I have clients coming from places they haven't before and could use that help.
I need a little more information.
So, Kate, let me know, from the way that I am understanding is just having kind of the jurisdictions borders where those jurisdictions actually start and end. We do have that information available. Karen, if you want to go ahead and go over that.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple different things. The tool is out on our website, and you can link to that. In fact, I'm gonna go out of here for just a minute, and we're going to take a look at that. As far as submitting those, if you're trying to fill that in, you've got a lot of people that have come in and you don't know where they are. Absolutely. If you can send us an Excel spreadsheet, I'm guessing this is what you're saying, I could be wrong, but if you want to send us an Excel spreadsheet of addresses, we are able to, on our end, very quickly to plug those addresses in to figure out which jurisdiction they fell into. So you can do one of two things. You can either use the tool, and I'm going to show you right here. To this applicant proposal, you will find these partner agencies. If you come down to the urban eligibility mapping tools, this is where you can either use the address locator and you can plug us and it will pull up and tell you which section it's in. So if I'm on.
And while Karen is doing that, I do want to answer the question that Frank has about zip codes, identifying zip codes rather than addresses. You do have that capability.
Yes, but we need the address to figure out what jurisdiction a person is in, because a zip code alone isn't going to do it. You have some zip codes that'll overlap 3 different jurisdictions. So if you're capturing addresses for your program, and you need help in having us just plug them in on our back end and tell you where those all fill out, which jurisdiction, particularly to fill out that population served table, we can do that. If somebody is identifying as homeless, then you can go ahead and identify that they're in the Salt Lake urban county. But really what we want, the reason that we capture information on the jurisdictions is there are 12 different small cities and towns, and there's 5 metro townships that are basically putting their allocations into this pot to serve individuals throughout the county. And we report back to those mayors and let them know, hey, this is how your dollars are being used. So even though an individual may be eligible, we're looking for where was the last address that they came from. So eligibility wise, you can serve them. For example, if you're serving CDBG, you're using CDBG funds, you can go ahead and serve them regardless of where they're at for most of the programs, but we still want you to capture the information if you have it. Just make your best estimate so that we can tell the story to the mayors and the jurisdictions. What you're seeing on the screen is that eligibility mapping tool, and you'll notice if I plugged in an address on the right side, it said this falls under Mill Creek. So if I had an individual that said this is where I lived, or this is where I'm coming from, then I would use Mill Creek to report that individual.
Great. And we do have another question. Can you send a link to that address tool?
Yes, can, but you can also, what I would recommend, just so that you know where to find them in the future if it gets buried in your email, is go to our Salt Lake County website, go to SLCO.org /HCD. We do have the links that are in the materials that will be provided in Zoom grants. So the handouts will have all the links that will be live. But on this page, you've got all kinds of resources. You're able to look at, again, the urban eligibility mapping tools is where you're going to find the address locator and the map. We had talked earlier about the Playing by the Rules handbook. We have links here to understand CDBG, ESG, the income calculator. If you want to use the HUD income calculator, the link is also here. And then the information on the OMB uniform guidance is here. So I would highly, highly recommend that you become familiar with our Salt Lake County website and the portal here. There's also, you'll notice later on, it's not here now, these are old training, but once these materials are available, you can also come to our website to find prior training materials. Billing cover sheets are here. Any of the required forms when we get to a contract phase are here. So I just recommend that you become familiar. While here, I will say that there's also within the applicant and provider portal, you have resources on income guidelines, you have resources on plans and reports. So any of the consolidated plans, anything like that, you'll find listed here as well. I also want to show you here at the bottom, I sent this out through an email pretty mass yesterday, but if you are moving or want to update your contact information, the most effective way to do that is to come through our website and do it here because that goes into one database that we can then look at the most recent contact information. So I saw something pop up. I do want to mention that, Amanda, maybe you can read it, but.
Yes, Jen just wanted to remind everyone that Zoom grants works much better in the morning than in the afternoon. If you want to go ahead and just talk about what Zoom grants is kind of dealing with right now and the volume.
Yeah, so the Zoom grants, for those of you that have used Zoom grants for years, for the most part, we've had really good feedback. It's intuitive, it's easy to, just been something that overall has had really good support. Zoom grants also has a lot of agencies and jurisdictions that are utilizing it to roll out a lot of the COVID relief dollars. It has literally, it's killed their servers. They are working fast and furious to build new servers and transfer things over and resolve the issue. But currently, because there's so much volume, I've noticed, yeah, it's really, really bogged down during the weekdays and particularly in the afternoons. I know I jump on in the evenings because it works faster. The weekends, not asking you who are on the time clock to do that, but it definitely, we're seeing the repercussions, but know that they're working very hard. I do cringe a little bit because even with this application, I know that we have a short time frame and there's some frustrations there. So I appreciate that. I think it was Jen that pointed that out, that if you're having frustrations with the slow, to maybe try it at a different time of day. Also, if your screen freezes up on you, if you're entering something and you're getting that saving forever, you can click outside the box and see if it kind of knocks that out. But if you do that, make sure whatever you were doing was saved. I've noticed sometimes if I click out before it's finished saving, it didn't actually save what I thought it did. So
great. Another reminder that I would like to everybody be aware of is if you are working on a Word document, for example, if and when you use a cut and paste, make sure that you do that in a plain text format. Otherwise, the way that Zoom Grants is set up, it's not going to collect that data. And so essentially it's not going to capture that information. I've spent many of times having to go back because I made that mistake. So I just wanted to let everybody be aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. All right, so if there aren't any other questions for this first part, let me recap. The application has been shortened somewhat, but we understand there's still a lot of information we're asking for. We're hoping that we've streamlined things by making it more multiple choice and checkboxes rather than a lot of narratives. You are not speaking to the need. What you're speaking to is alignment of your project or your program with the priorities that Housing and Community Development has set. And looking at appendix number C is going to be critical just to kind of frame yourself as to what priority are you applying under. And remember, once you determine the priority, drill down to the recovery focus. I can't say that enough. We know that you all do good work all the time for years, and you will ongoing. But this year for FY21, we want to focus on recovery, and we want to focus on how do we make sure that the vulnerable populations that are served by all of you don't get left behind. How do we make sure that if there's barriers or there's emerging data that says, you know what, we know this is an issue, how is your organization uniquely qualified to address that with the populations that you so expertly serve? So frame everything within that. Again, housing mobility, economic mobility with the additional lens of recovery. Don't get too bogged down in the performance metrics or other than report it out as what we're looking for. We also remember that you've got a lot of reference material here. We have not gone through it all. Most of you on the call that are going to drop off here in a minute are probably well familiar with it. Your most important appendix is going to be C, and it's going to be your scoring criteria to understand what the committee is looking at. Those are the two that I would focus on. If you have questions about specifics, how the homeless definitions or anything like that, they're here. But I don't think it's something that you need to dig into and know right now. Definitely, if recommended for funding, there's a lot of things that we'll work through on the contract piece of it. But right now, just speak to the application, answer the questions, and call us if you have any questions or concerns or just need some guidance. I would like to give, Amanda, are there any other questions before I? That would be no. I would like to give Mike, and maybe he can't unmute. I don't know, Mike, do you want to take 2 minutes to address anything that that you think that this group needs before we move on to the in-depth dive?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm joining you late, but we're working on some other COVID matters this morning. So just want to welcome you and glad you're participating in this training. I have nothing in particular to share with you at this time, and I'll just go ahead and let Karen and staff go ahead with training. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. All right. So everybody that's on the call, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please reach out. We're going to give, it's 11:20. I'm going to give this about 3 minutes for anybody that is going to drop off the call to do that, and so that we can see who is remaining on the call that would like to participate in a deeper dive into compliance requirements. So it's 11:20. We're going to wait till 11:23. This recorded training will be available usually within about 24 hours. That will be, the link will be put into the training slides. They will be available both on Zoom Grants and on our website, and you'll be able to reference them probably starting tomorrow afternoon, if not tomorrow night. Thank you again. Okay, looks like we still have quite a few people that are on the call. We're going to go ahead and move forward. First of all, as we mentioned earlier in the training, we recognize that there are some people that really need depth understanding of how Zoom Grants works. So we're going to have Amanda talk about creating an application in Zoom Grants. And Amanda, again, I'm going to display this on my screen, but tell me if I need to move forward.
Perfect, thank you. So when using Zoom Grants to submit and manage an application, you will want to make sure that you have created an account, and you will want to use that account to log in. In order to get to the application, there are a few different ways to go about that. You can go to our website, and it will allow you to connect that way, or you can go to the county's program and see which applications are currently open. When you create your application, you will want to click on the apply button, and there you will want to identify which program that you're applying for. So you will see multiple open programs. If you are working on the application, most likely you will invite other collaborators to work on this with you. In order to do that, you'll want to make sure that on the first tab of the application, you invite those individuals to work on the application with you. In order to do that, you'll identify and enter their email address, and then you will indicate which type of sections you want them to be allowed to collaborate with. They will be sent an invitation to that email with the information on how to access and edit the application. Note, just be aware, let's see. If multiple people are working on the application at the same time, when you are entering the information, it is being captured live. And so I would recommend, just working together and coordinating so that as the information is being entered, it is actually being captured within Zoom Grants. Karen, if you want to go ahead and scroll down a little bit, make sure to answer the questions and fill out the budget tab. We also ask that you upload documents with the application, and what you'll want to do is within the Documents tab, you will navigate and upload whichever document that you need to reference and complete. Just be aware that any document that is marked with the yellow required must be something that is uploaded or linked within that slot within the application. If you feel like it is not applicable, please create a document in which you make a note that it is inapplicable and upload that within the slot. Templates are orange, and there is a link to download that template. Again, just make sure that you fill out the document and upload it into that slot. There is a help button, and if you have any questions, I encourage you to reference that. There is a quick tutorial video. Zoom Grants University is great if you have specific questions on Zoom Grants. If you have specific questions on the application, I would encourage you to reference the library and reach out to staff. Before submitting the application, just make sure that you've gone through each of the tabs and you have answered them as the best that you can with clear information. You will also see that there are some frequently asked questions. Here, for example, if you need to identify additional applications for a funding program, how can I add other email addresses to receive notifications? How you would access the application once you've already started or if you've submitted. We recommend that you use Chrome, but you can use any browser or any internet-enabled device. Who should you contact if you have any questions? Again, if you have specific questions on the application, please reach out to Karen Kuipers, myself, or Vikram. We will be available to answer questions and address concerns. If you have technical questions, we ask that you reach out to Zoom Grants. Great, thank you. Now we will go into an in-depth review on Appendix A, compliance requirements and funding source references. And we will go over tab 5, organizational compliance specific to funding sources. Karen, if you want to go ahead and click on that document.
So I'm clicking. My computer's a little bit slow. I don't know if you're seeing the blue spinning, but
yes, we are. And it is slowly but surely working.
okay, so for Appendix A, which is your compliance requirements, I believe that Amanda actually went into pretty good detail originally for this Appendix A. So I think she's already gone through this pretty well. On tab 5, on the organizational compliance, I do want to revisit that, and let's go through that. I'm going to hide. For those of you, again, are new, I make sure to hide all of these all of these things that pop up. Otherwise, you won't ever see anything on your screen. So once you hide those, you'll be able to see your tabs. And as we look at this tab number 5, let's talk about these requirements. When you go through, it's going to be very specific. So for the eligible activities and objectives, take a look. Are you meeting the SSBG, CDBG, or ESG? And just read it. On SSBG, it's economic self-support, self-sufficiency, preserving, rehabilitating, reuniting families. There's some restricted activities. That is covered in Appendix A, and it will tell you which of those activities are specifically not allowed, both for SSBG and CDBG. Read through on the national objective. Are you serving low to moderate income individuals? Are you looking at more of a low to moderate income area? For this group, for this application, what you're primarily going to be serving is those low to moderate income households, those that are at or below 80% of AMI. With ESG, it has to be activities that are serving those who are homeless, whether they are at imminent risk of homeless, so it's homeless prevention, or whether they are literally homeless. There are activities that also deal with street outreach. I don't know if we have anybody on the phone that is looking at street outreach, but that is also an eligible activity under CDBG. On the geographic areas, again, Salt Lake County, for the entire county, SSBG can be used for. CDBG, I want to be clear on this. In the past, we have really zeroed in on a ratio. We've said if you have a $100,000 project and you are serving 40% of individuals that are within the urban county jurisdictions, not the entitlements, then we would say we can fund up to 40% of your project. We are really looking now, this year and last, particularly as the urban county continues to change, we want to prove reasonable benefit. We need to go back to the mayors and to the powers that be at the different urban county jurisdictions, and we need to let them know that their dollars that are all in this pot is being put to good use and that there's a reasonable benefit to their citizens. And so that is why it's so important to track and report on where are the individuals coming from? Where do they reside that you are serving? Again, with homelessness, if they're homeless, they're going to be eligible. They're going to fall under the urban county umbrella. But if they're homeless and they came from Mill Creek, we want to capture that information. We want Mill Creek to know, hey, their last place of permanent residence was Mill Creek, and we want them to be included in those numbers, or Murray, or wherever they're coming from. So just another push to please, if you can, capture that information on where they're residing, or if they're not currently residing, where did they come from? Where did they last live? 90 or more days is the guideline, but really just ask them, where was the last place that you had a permanent residence? Let's see, matching funds. Again, SSBG, you've got to have at least 25%. And this needs to be cash. This isn't in-kind resources. So if you are able to match that, probably SSBG is the most liberal, the most with the fewest restrictions, other than the state requirement. So if you're looking to serve folks countywide, and you can let us know that you do have that 25% match, that will make you eligible for SSBG funds. CDBG does not have a requirement to match, although we do like to see leverage. And ESG, if somebody is literally homeless, there's not an income requirement. There is the requirement that they document homelessness, and there's several different definitions of homelessness, which we have the information attached in the library documents. But bottom line is, there's a dollar for dollar cash match requirement for ESG. I'm sorry, dollar to dollar cash or in-kind match for the ESG. So if you're asking for ESG funds, look at all of your in-kind as well as your cash. And you may have, for example, if the LDS Church is helping provide your program, food, or other in-kind donations, and you're tracking that and you're documenting that, you can use that as match for ESG. On the licenses and certifications, and I apologize, I just completely a minute ago confused everybody because I jumped down into income eligibility. Went back up to the matching funds. But the SSBG is for low and moderate income households. That is up to 80% of AMI. We don't have specific policies for SSBG. We're just requiring that if you say you're serving low to moderate income individuals, that you are documenting in your written policies. For CDBG, again, this is up to 80% of AMI. There are very specific HUD requirements on how you are calculating that. And the information on how to determine that is also in our resource documents. You can take a look at the HUD income calculator, which is really helpful. Or if you have questions, reach out and we'll provide technical assistance to be calculating and documenting income. Again, back to ESG, if they're homeless and receiving homeless prevention assistance, they need to have incomes at or below 30% of AMI. But if they're literally homeless, there is not an income requirement. On the eligibility issues, as I mentioned a minute ago, on SSBG, there is the requirement that you are participating in the SAVE program if you are eligible. We've had some new guidance in the last 2 years from our district attorney. And if you are a nonprofit organization, the requirements are not as strict as they were years ago, but the main thing is you really need to be serving with SSBG funds. It's if you are serving those that are here legally and documenting that through an affidavit, that is a consideration if you're awarded SSBG funds. CDBG does not have any kind of requirement for that. So if you are serving those who may or may not be documented, we would, or as far as immigration status, CDBG and ESG is not going to have a requirement regarding that. All organizations that receive any of our funding do need to use the employee status verification system. And all of our organizations need to have a conflict of interest policy, and it needs to be written. The communication policy, we're just going to say you need to have it. I know SSBG is not a grant requirement, but it's good administrative practice. But you need to have a communication policy. We need to know, how are you serving those that are not speaking English, or that if they are have hearing impairments, or if they have visual impairments, you serving them, and you need to have that communication policy in writing. Same thing with the language assistance plan, not a grant requirement for SSBG, but I'm going to say across the board, you just need to have a language assistance plan. How is it that you're working with individuals who don't speak English, or their English is not their first language? The non-discrimination policy, everybody needs to have one. So you just need to have it, and it needs to be in writing in your written policies. Procurement, everybody needs to comply with 2 CFR Part 200. Most of the agencies that we work with have this pretty down. If you are an organization that's never heard about it before, that is far more in depth and in scope than we can go into during this time. So please reach out and let's talk about that if you don't know what 2 CFR Part 200 is. Demographics, you all need to have, if you're going to have a grant award from Salt Lake County Housing and Community Development, you need to collect and report data on race, ethnicity, gender, disability characteristics of participants and the beneficiaries. The eligibility record keeping, this is huge. This is where we run into trouble all the time. If you are receiving funds from us, there is an eligibility factor. You need to document it. Whether it's with SAVE, making sure that the SAVE documentation is, you're determining that they're at or below 80%. With the CDBG, we've got to have documentation on who's being served and what eligible city or unincorporated county. So somewhere in your intake process, you've got to be capturing that information on their address or where they last lived. And on ESG, you've got to document the homelessness, which means that even if they're literally homeless, you've got to have some kind of an affidavit. We can help you with this if necessary, but you've got to have documentation that they are saying, yes, I'm homeless and I'm seeking services. So, or you've got to have a third party, your case manager, with an affidavit and certifying to their homeless status. All of you should have a DUNS number. Even though it's not an SSBG requirement, it's a housing and community development requirement. So if you don't have one, you'll be flagged before your application goes to the committee. Board requirements, everybody should have an active engaged board. With ESG funds, you've got to have not only the active engaged board, but you've got to have participation from homeless individuals, meaningful participation with your board. HUD has recognized as of late that it's not even realistic to say that you have a homeless individual on your board, but it is necessary that we have meaningful participation. Maybe you've got a group, an advisory group that's meeting and considering those decisions that the board is making and giving their input. Whatever it is, you've got to let us know what your process is and what your written policy is to get that input from individuals with lived experience. Let's see, on other restrictions, everybody that is receiving funds for homeless services, you need to be participating with the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. In the past, we've asked that you identify the outcomes by the Collective Impact Homelessness Steering Committee. We're not asking that this year. We are asking that if you are receiving funds for homeless services, that you are actively engaged and involved with the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. Okay, we talked a little bit about the resources on the urban eligibility mapping tools. Again, I'm going to walk you through, for those of you on the call, best place to get that is really the applicant and provider portal. Zoom grants right now. This year I'm recommending that you get familiar with our portal and use this instead. So again, come to the applicant and provider portal and come down here to partner agency resources. Within this, you're going to have drop downs. Your urban mapping tools are going to be found here. Policy and reference tools. this CDBG Playing by the Rules Handbook, if you are a new grantee or you have never had CDBG funds or really any of these SSBG or ESG funds, take a look at this and read through it. It's really good stuff. It looks like it's old. I think it's probably 2006, but everything that is in that handbook is just good information on internal controls, on compliance requirements, on making sure that you're documenting things the way that you're supposed to. And it's just got a lot of really good points for those of you that are new to any of the federal funding sources. The HUD income calculator that I mentioned a minute ago, if you are not familiar with how to calculate annual income or monthly income and how to document that, this is a really good resource. I would click on it right now and just take you to it, but you do need to do a sign-in. But you're able to plug in the information. There's also a really good handbook that is associated with it that will tell you best practices for obtaining documentation for income and how to calculate it. So let's see. The right now, but be aware that if you're awarded SSBG funds, you are also required to be aware of Department of Human Services and their cost principles, which are outlined here. Okay, it is 11:44. It's about 15 minutes prior to the end when we had planned on wrapping this up. I would like to take 15 minutes, and rather than me go through different documents, I'd like to have questions and understand where your concerns are or your questions, so we can write into those very specific things. So, Amanda, if you will let me know if you have anything to address.
Yes, it does look like we have a couple of comments, questions in the chat. One of them is, when will this grant appear on the main Salt Lake County page?
Should be there right now. It should have been there at midnight. I won't show it right now, but as soon as we get off this call, I will verify if we're having some kind of issue, but it went live at midnight.
Perfect. And another question is from Jen. For homelessness, does contacting them to a shelter count as verification?
So if they're at a shelter and they've done an intake, yes. If they're actually at a shelter, you're going to have the certification. I would suggest if you're not the shelter and they're signing something when they come in, that you have something that, yes, that attaches that they had a bed night there. So if you're able to pull up and say, yes, they were here and at the shelter, and you didn't have them physically sign something, that's fine too, as long as they're showing up on your roster.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I jumped on for a second. I thought, so if we can pull them out on a HIMSS report, would that work for a verification?
Yes.
Or do they have to actually sign something?
No.
Okay.
No, if you're checking them in and they're actually staying in the shelter, you're good.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, and I just wanted to let you know, I did double check on the main page and it's still not showing up, so.
Perfect. Karen, I believe we just need to reach out to Zoom grants.
Okay, we'll take care of that offline. So thank you so much, Jen. We'll make sure that's available within the hour. Meanwhile, what I will do is we will directly after this meeting, I will have our person in office post the link on our website as well, directly to this specific application. Amanda, have you got anybody else?
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Again, a reminder, if you want, you're more than welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can ask a question in the chat.
So while we're, and unless we have another question or if something pops up, let me know. If we have a couple minutes, I will dig into a couple of these other documents then to give you some information. So on this reference on the health and social determinants of health, within the application, we mention that with our SAMI application, we have a housing stability metric that is being captured on the back end. Those individuals that are utilizing SAMI and have that tool that is working for them, we are able to pull de-identified information in to start tracking what is going on with individuals. Can we see that certain interventions are beginning to have an impact on their housing stability? For our definition of housing stability, which I have on the screen right now, we have a research-backed hypothesis that is basically measuring perception, circumstances, access to resources, and controls for demographic factors that are going into an overall housing stability index. More importantly for you on the call, though, is to understand that what this is measuring is that we understand that not only do the social determinants of health, which you've probably all heard about in the different domains that impact a person's health, but we also have different silos of research that all lead into the justification, the verification that the social determinants of health also impact housing stability. And if we can track and if we have performance metrics that show how people are increasing in these different domains, that of economic stability, education, the community and social context, neighborhood and physical environment, healthcare system, and food. As people make increases within these domains, we know that it also directly impacts their housing stability. So that's why we've overlaid the two, both the health and the housing stability, on the matrix that you're seeing. And the reason this is important for our nonprofit providers is because as we talk about housing stability, okay, if you are providing, I'm just going to say food, if you have a food pantry, we recognize that by stabilizing an individual with food, we can draw the correlation to housing stability. So if you are measuring and if you are able to show how you are impacting access to healthy options and hunger, we have that correlation drawn to housing stability. If you are measuring and can show that you are helping clients increase their or decrease their debt or increase their income or reduce their expenses or help with their medical bills, we know that by impacting this domain of economic stability, it has a direct associated impact on housing stability. So for those of you that are providing services that maybe don't have housing specifically in the name of the service, I want to share this graph with you again to illustrate how your services are known to impact the housing stability of the clients that you serve. This handout is available in the library documents, and it also has some additional information on page 2 that I'm not going to read, but it talks more about understanding the social determinants of health. And I invite you, if you have a few minutes and you don't really understand or you'd like to know more about why we have the performance indicators that we do, that you're reporting on, why are we tracking the number of people that have increased income or that have a level increased on a BEST exam, it's because we can show that it has an impact on the social determinant of health domains and likewise on housing stability. So this may be additional information that would be helpful for you to understand. For those of you that are on the call that are working with homeless individuals, I want to point out a few of these library documents that are going to be very helpful for you. Not only is the rapid rehousing income requirements, this is just a HUD FAQ that identifies that, again, if you have somebody that's literally homeless that's coming into your shelter, was that Jen that was talking? They're already there's no income requirement. If you have somebody that you're working with, well, what are they? What's the homelessness? How does that look? This document that says homeless definition and record requirements, this is going to be helpful to you. This defines per HUD who is literally homeless, who is at imminent risk, who under other statute is still considered homeless. And for example, those that are fleeing or attempting to flee DV, those individuals are considered homeless. If they are fleeing domestic violence, they don't have another residence, and they lack the resources or the support networks to obtain permanent housing, you don't need to have any other verification of homelessness. You just need to have a verification of the domestic violence that they're meeting these requirements, and they're therefore eligible for ESG dollars. At risk of homelessness is a little fuzzier. Those that are at risk of homelessness are eligible for homeless prevention, but there's some very specific things that need to happen. So if you're looking for homeless prevention dollars, they do need to be at or below 30%, and they need to meet one of these other requirements. For those of you that are administering COVID dollars, just ignore everything I said, because there's some waivers in place that go up to 50%. But for these regular funds, these are the HUD requirements. Also, very helpful at the bottom of this document that's in your library resources is the documentation requirement. So if you are talking about a homeless, and Jen, I think this goes to your question, how to document that they're literally homeless? You can do a written observation by an outreach caseworker. You can do a referral by a housing provider, or the certification that they're seeking shelter. But for what you're talking about, that is going to be an observation if they've ended up in your shelter and they've ended up in HMIS. So again, imminent risk or all these others, I would recommend that if you're looking potentially at ESG funds, that you understand the documentation requirements, and it also gives you some insight as to what is considered homeless as far as HUD is concerned. I would also recommend that as you take a look at this, we've mentioned the Digital Divide and Telecommunications Project. I want to clarify that particularly for soft cost projects, we're not talking about broadband. That's not even what we're talking about. But there is some guidance from HUD that has come down that has said, yes, CDBG public service funds can assist with certain digital divide issues. And so there's some attachments here that will talk about what's allowable and what's not allowable and some examples of that. And so you can certainly look at that if that applies. I did not even try to put the data that's coming down the line care. I literally probably get 2 in my inbox a day. But for those of you that are seeing this trend, that individual parents are trying to, they've lost their job or they had to take reduced hours or whatever it is, and they need to return to the workforce, but there's some real challenges right now with childcare. And beyond just our typical notion of childcare with the younger kids, but trying to be the homeschool teacher, trying to be teacher and monitor that and give access to those kids who maybe aren't in daycare, but absolutely the parent is now having to be the breadwinner and the teacher. So as you're seeing those come down the pipeline and you're seeing it impact the clients that you serve, again, I haven't put data on the library resources, but you could open up any of the papers and find quite a bit of that. Just know that we are aware of that. The county is aware of that. And that's the reason that we have listed that as one of the activities that we know has a correlation to recovery. The other thing is when you look at the this handout, I won't open it right now, but it was in the PowerPoint that you were looking at earlier. It does have correct contact information. And if you have more questions on Zoom grants and you want to read the step-by-step instructions, then please go ahead and download this handout, and that will help you. We have also included in the library document samples of the contracts. So if you were awarded funds, you may want to just take a look at those and see, okay, I'm new to this. What would I actually have to sign on the bottom line about if you received SSBG, ESD, or CDBG? And so these are good references to just take a glance at and understand what you would be signing off on if you receive the funding. So. Okay, Amanda, has anything else come in while we've been reviewing this?
There has not been any other questions or concerns in the chat.
Okay, so I'm going to give it another minute. We're coming right up on noon when we wanted to wrap this up. I think I am going to go back to the PowerPoint slides that will be available to show you again that there is a slide on here with resource information. This slide has contact information for myself, for Amanda and Vikram. It also has Mary, our office specialist, our contract and compliance specialist, and our folks that are in our fiscal team and on environmental reviews. So their contact information is here as well. We do have the deadline on the 1st. I think somebody brought it up earlier, could we do it over the weekend? Certainly we're available, although I would highly recommend that you get that in if possible by Friday. Don't wait till that morning. And again, recognizing that Zoom grants is really overloaded right now. The last thing I would want is somebody to try to get in at 8 o'clock in the morning to hit submit, and all of a sudden the server's down or everything's bogged down. So the earlier the better, but go ahead and send emails, and our telephone numbers are here as well. For me, I'm going to share that you can also on my email, I don't have it right here, but my cell phone number is listed. You are welcome to either call me on my cell phone or text me as well. I do sometimes see that as my emails. So we want to work with you in this very shortened time frame to answer your questions promptly. We will post an FAQ to the website as questions come in and we answer them, so that and that will be updated so that anybody has access to questions that may be coming up from other applicants.
Perfect, thank you. And Karen, I just wanted to let everybody be aware, I have reached out to Zoom Grants and asked them to confirm when those, all 3 of our programs have gone live.
Okay. All right, any last minute questions, Betty?
It does look like we have a comment from Jen. She just wants to thank us again so much for the training session and keeping everybody informed during this crazy time.
Well, and thank you all for doing what you're doing in the trenches. We appreciate you more than we could ever express, and know that this definitely is crazy time, and everybody's just going as fast and furious to help those that you're all passionate about serving. So thank you. We will wrap this up. Watch for the information to be posted on Zoom Grants, and we will also, within the hour, I will make sure that the individual links to this application are available on our website in case the Salt Lake County homepage is not reflecting them for some reason on the Zoom Grants. So thank you all.
Great. I just want to remind everybody that if you need to reach out to staff, you're more than able to send us an email. If you want to send it to all 3 of us, Karen, myself, and Vikram, and then we can try to respond with the reply all so that everybody is being contacted as soon as possible.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.